And at the end, if I've missed anybody, they can just chime in and let me know. So Kenneth Williams, Tom Wendorf, Amy Julian, Brittany Boston, Dan Kunert, Michelle Velez, Eric Hansen, Craig Kistinger, LaDonna Henson, and Lori Favela. Did I miss anybody? Great, awesome. Thanks everybody and welcome. Great. We do have two new people who are joining us for the first time today, and I'll let them take a moment to introduce themselves. Kenneth?
Hi, thank you. I'm Kenneth Williams. I've been with the state now for almost a full year. Hard to believe. I'm manager over special populations, which includes various special pops such as youth, reentry communities, disability, and also immigrants, basically any special pops.
Great. Well, you've come to the right place. That's what we do here too. Michelle. Michelle, I think you might be muted. Perhaps not. Well, Michelle, I see her. She's here. So hopefully we'll hear from her in a moment. She is Michelle's with DRS in the Employer Solutions Group, I think it's called. Great, thank you. Great, today what we're going to do is just a quick recap of what we did in our last meeting. Then we're going to get an introduction to career pathways. I mean, we are the Career Pathways for Targeted Populations group. I think it's really important that we've talked a lot about the targeted populations, about disability, and the functional definitions of disability that we've talked about. I'd like to spend some time today talking about sort of the other half of career pathways, which is the career pathways, and sort of what they are, what they're for, and then how they might complement the work that we're doing on this committee. And we have a couple of presenters on that, and I'm looking forward to that. Then we are going to review some of the priorities. We sent out a survey after our last meeting looking to prioritize areas that we'd like to focus on first. And so we have the results of that. We'll talk about that. And then rolling out of that, hopefully that will inform some of our conversation about the webinar that we're going to be sponsoring in October. And we can start to narrow in on a topic and potential speakers. Great, I know there are a couple of new people and we're still getting rolling. So I do want to review our charge and our priorities as a group. We're focused on identifying and providing strategies and solutions for eliminating barriers to ongoing employment of individuals with disabilities. The key things here are, we're focused on identifying strategies. So we're trying to find successes and to share those successes broadly around the state. We're looking at barriers. So we're going to focus on things that get in the way, and we're going to kind of talk about successes that people have had removing those barriers. And finally, I think important words here is ongoing employment. We're looking for things not just at the hiring stage, but also the kinds of barriers that get in the way of people retaining and succeeding in roles over the long haul. Our conversation is going to be around service integration. So again, where has the state and business and other organizations work together in order to create solutions? Career pathways, which we're going to start on today, and then continuous improvement, which are ways to kind of keep getting better as we go forward. Good. Molly?
Great. So in summary of our last meeting, we had a meeting last in June, and we heard a great presentation by Joshua Long, the principal at Southside Occupational Academy in Chicago, who gave us an overview of the programs that they have for their students at their school, which is a transition center for students with disabilities. So that was a really great practical example of applying career pathway work while working with students with disabilities. We also started to discuss some of the solutions to the barriers faced by those with disabilities in accessing career pathways, and you'll see those listed on the yellow middle portion of the screen. And we're going to dive deeper into these today when we discuss the homework. I know that you all had a chance to think about some of these in the homework survey. And then finally, we reviewed our work plan and got our work plan established for this group, including a workforce webinar in October, which will work on scheduling and getting finalized, and then looking at ongoing professional development recommendations that we can provide.
So a really good way to start off is to get an underlying understanding of what career pathways is. So this definition actually comes from Ed Systems Career Pathways Dictionary. And you'll see that the concepts really align nicely with this work group's mission, goals, values. So a career pathway is a combination of rigorous, high quality education, training, and other services that align both vertically and horizontally across various education and training arenas, secondary ed, adult ed, workforce training and development. A key is that there's a collaborative partnership with these entities, businesses, and industry, along with the human service agencies, corrections, and other community stakeholders, to serve as a foundational structure for high quality and sustainable career pathways. A career pathway also includes, well, it's standardized individual access, so individual needs, so multiple entry and exit points to facilitate individuals building their skills as they progress along a continuum of education, training, and move forward in their sector-specific employment. I'm not going to read these columns to you, don't worry. But what this shows is that the Career Pathways Dictionary is really detailed. These next slides from Amy, Molly, Sarah will detail out the concepts listed out here, but this is a great resource to really dive deep into what is a career pathway, what does it mean, and who all the partners are, because it really is a collaborative effort to help people choose their path and advance forward.
We wanted to take a quick minute and dig deep into the guidance. So the Career Pathway Dictionary was facilitated by NIU, but it was produced by the Illinois State Board of Education, the Illinois Community College Board, DCEO, IDES, DHS, all of the partners that it impacts. And so it's a really exciting document. If you haven't seen that, follow the links, check out what it talks about, because it really does guide a lot of the career pathway work. And it is the definition that the state mandates. You know, they all came together, they came up with the definition that Kenneth has shared with us, and really looking at, they've also provided some guidance. So we're going to dive into that guidance here over the next couple slides. And really, that's what they designed it for. So the guidance should help policymakers such as ourselves and practitioners implement state, regional, and local career pathways. So I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but I just want to let you know that we're going to dive into this A through G of the next career pathways, and what that guidance is that they were intentional about providing us, so we know what we're looking at when we say a career pathway, that everybody from DCEO to ICCB and everybody in between has that shared definition. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the first one there, sorry, my connection must be a little slow because I'm going a little slower behind. Align, so guidance says that it will need to follow these things. So it will need to align with the skills and needs of industry and the economy of the state, region, or economy involved. So you're going to have career pathways that are local, you're going to have career pathways that are regional, and you're going to have statewide career pathways. And there are some areas of the state, and I'm sure you all know this, where certain occupations yield a higher price point than other occupations, but they align with the needs and industry of a particular area. It prepares an individual to be successful in any of a full range of secondary or post-secondary educational options, including apprenticeships registered under the National Apprenticeship Act. So it's not only for registered apprentices, but it's also anybody who's going to be successful in secondary and post-secondary education. And it includes counseling to support an individual in achieving their individual education career goals. Moving on, it also includes an appropriate education offered concurrently in the same context as workforce preparation activities and training for specific occupations and career clusters. And it organizes educational training and other services to meet particular needs for an individual in a manner that accelerates the educational and career advancements of those individuals to the content practicable. A career pathway should also enable an individual to obtain secondary school diploma and a recognized equivalent, or at least one recognized post-secondary credential. So you're looking at something that builds on itself. So a high school diploma on its own is not a complete career pathway, nor is a post-secondary unit on its own or a certificate or credential. It's a pathway between both secondary and post-secondary, or adult ed and post-secondary. And it helps an individual enter or advance within a specific occupation or occupational cluster. And Sarah has graciously posted the link in the chat there to the Career Pathway Dictionary. So if you haven't seen that document, I really encourage you to spend some time on it. There was a lot of time put into really developing it, and I know they are talking about slight updates at this point. I know apprenticeship has come up with a new definition that they're looking to incorporate, but for the most part, that is a living, breathing document that is being guiding the state's work. So moving to the next slide.
I was just going to comment, Amy, because I actually have another meeting I have to get to, that in reading that stuff, I think it's also important as a group and as a business person, we have to be mindful of it's that career pathway, that this is a general definition. And when we think about individuals, right, our programming addresses the big audience, but as a practitioner, you may be working with an individual, and that career pathway might be limited based on certain realistic barriers, but our goal is to take them as far as we can within this definition and try to do what we can to strip away those barriers, right? That high school education may be the best that person can get, right? But if we can go farther, we should absolutely try.
And what we're saying is the career pathway is the idea of some kind of agreement between secondary, post-secondary, adult ed,
Right.
and post-secondary. And when you look at that individual component, that's your program of study. And each program has its own program of study, and the programs of study are very unique and localized, whereas the career pathways are national, state, and regional. And so you're looking at different aspects of career development. But yes, as a career pathway targeted populations committee, we need to be aware of all of those. And Kenneth, I didn't mean to take your slide, so I'll pause and let you go.
Meaningful conversation. And again, including industry and businesses is a core component of career pathways. So for some old school WIOA folks, these industries here might seem slightly different from the ones we might be used to. And we also might want to think about how some of these industries have been impacted by the pandemic. But here are some of the broad pathway areas. Finance, health and science is always a big one. IT, manufacturing, agriculture and food. But there's also the human and public services and arts and communication, which are highlighted for some of us who may not have been used to that in the older years.
Thanks. Well, Kenneth and Amy just went over like the broad career pathway, but for an individual, this is kind of what a career pathway looks like. So first they engage in training and earn credentials as an initial step in a career pathway, like in the industries Kenneth just outlined. Then they become employed in an entry-level job in an occupation of training. And then they can re-engage in training and earn additional credentials to support career advancement. So we're kind of building into a career pathway. And then they get promoted in a current job or advance in a career within an industry. So the whole point is starting into the job with a credential or education, and then being able to excel and move forward and up within that job. If Molly, you can move forward, please. Oh, here's Amy.
Well, and that goes very well to what Craig said. Their starting point could be a high school diploma, absolutely. But every job needs some kind of either on-the-job training or a way in which you increase your knowledge base. So the career pathway system under WIOA is a new way of doing business. It creates a framework for the existing educational workforce system, but it shifts from job attainment to career and economic success. What do we want? When we talk about equity and the work of the equity task force and really looking at what an equitable workforce looks like, we talk about the idea of making these not just be a job for today, but also career with advancement and opportunities for advancement. It really transforms the role of the employer from a customer to a partner. So that's really important. And that's also key in the difference between WIA being the Workforce Investments Act and WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So the transforming the role of the employer from customer to partner and a co-leader and co-investment in the development of the workforce, which is why we have the IWIB and the work that you all do, which is fantastic. It provides an opportunity for more flexible education and training and offers more efficient and customer-centered approach to workforce development. There's been a lot of discussion around human-centered design and what human-centered design means from DOL. It very much aligns for those of you who come from an education background on this call. It comes out of universal design. Those two both share similar parents, if you will, in educational theory. And so human-centered approaches and universal design for learning are, I will say, very closely related cousins. But looking at this tool, it just really looks at the way in which career pathway system, and that's the one I want you to take away from this, is the role of the employer is really a partner, and we're wanting to seek investment and knowledge in that individual. And Sarah, I think you're up next.
All right, and just like Amy said, so this is about creating pathways as well as partnerships. So who needs to be at that table to create those partnerships? Workforce development, secondary ed, post-secondary education, human services, vocational rehab, CBOs, community-based organizations. They help propel these pathways and then inform what curriculum individuals will take in order to excel within those career pathways.
We're doing a little popcorning today, so I think this is back to me. The state career pathway framework, and this, there it goes, is really looking at that secondary to post-secondary approach and those endorsements. And so what NIU has done is a lot of work with the endorsements with the pathways, post-secondary readiness act. Sorry, I'm getting them confused. But you're looking at, these are the elements of that. So individual planning, career-focused instruction, work-based learning, core academics, and then really moving from secondary to post-secondary, and whether that be through the GED or high school equivalency or moving into workforce training. What are those things that we're using to move our students forward, but also the outcomes are the same. We want individuals earning promising credentials for priority occupations and economic advancement. And next slide. So really, this is a great little Venn diagram talking about the criteria for pathway occupations. What is the minimum typical entry education level needed for a role or industry field? What is the median wage threshold for living wages, job openings, and then looking at that, why that comes together as a high priority. So you have job openings in the area, you have educational attainment and training, credentialing being available within those job openings or within those certifications that are needed, and then they're earning a sustainable wage. And sustainable wages are really important when we talk about career pathways. So again, back to the point that Craig made, yes, a high school diploma can be an entry point, but then to Sarah's point, it's not where the career pathway stops. It's really where the career pathway begins and moves into and jumps, sorry, I talk with my hands, moves into and jumps into additional advancement for that particular individual.
So going off of what Amy just talked about with wages, when we look at career pathways, we often look at the living wage, which is the minimum salary you would need in order to cover the typical cost of living expenses in your community. So there's a link right here. It's the MIT Living Wage Calculator. And so that's a really good tool just if you ever have some spare time to look at, and it allows you to look at a living wage depending on the area you live in, the number of children in a family, and the number of adults who are working in a given family. And it's a really helpful tool. I also want to take this opportunity. I just got an alert on my Zoom that our meeting has 9 minutes left. So I know what has occurred is that my Zoom has been reset. So what I'm going to do is we're going to keep moving for the next 9 minutes, but in the meantime, I am going to be emailing you on the side another link that you can use to rejoin when the Zoom does end in 9 minutes. Does anyone have any questions about that? I wanted to pause and go over that because I just got that notification. No? Okay. I know we can all relate to unexpected technology surprises that just brighten our days. So thank you. Okay. So going off of what I was discussing with a living wage, we also can talk about high priority occupations and promising credentials. And as Amy discussed earlier, oftentimes career pathways will vary based on a region, a city, a state. So there are various data sources that are available through the Department of Labor to look at promising credentials or promising certificate areas within a certain regional area, so that individuals can really focus in on what is going to allow them to be most successful in the region in which they live. And this final slide, we've given you a lot of content. We expect there to be, definitely ask us any questions in the next few minutes. But again, we're going to be sharing this PowerPoint with you. So if you find any of these areas we've discussed, areas that you'd like to learn more about, or that you have more questions, we have many resources listed here. I'll also be sending out with the meeting notes that Career Pathways Dictionary that we've been referring to as a PDF, so that you have that as an easy resource. But if we can go ahead right now, and if you want to take a couple of minutes to ask any questions or comments you might have. I do see in the chat that Pat posted a comment regarding the Career Pathways Guide. So I don't know if you want to go over that, David, but I see that that was in the chat.
Great. Pat, do you want to comment, or I can?
Sure, David and group. Just briefly, when we were in Springfield last spring, was it, or several springs ago, actually pre-COVID, we were first exposed to the guide, and I was very impressed with the logic, the digestibility of the process, and what clearly went into its development. That's my only supportive comment on the Career Pathways Guide.
Yeah, I'd agree, Pat. I've been through it as well, and I think it is very, very usable and very easy to work with. Other questions or comments? I have a question actually for people. What have we defined? Have quote unquote promising credentials been defined, or more promising career pathways defined? Because it'd be great to sort of focus some of our attention against those pathways.
Dennis, I want you to answer, but I will interject that I know they spent a lot of time looking at career pathways that earn a sustainable wage. And so it's not so much that it's a career pathway that everywhere is the same, but a career pathway that earns a sustainable wage. And there are parts of our state where, like, for example, welding and underwater welding and things of that nature earn a very sustainable wage. And then there are other parts of our state that welding is not as a revenue generator. So I don't know that they have, and Kenneth can answer that from a DCO standpoint, but I know there's a lot of focus on what is a sustainable wage and what are those career pathways leading to a sustainable wage.
Amy, obviously you've covered almost everything I would say. I think that what's important is that this does allow for the individual community areas to know what's happening in their community. And it's also highlighted things, and I don't want to open up a can of worms, but things like what should be stackable credentials not being the end spot, similar to like a high school diploma, hopefully not being the end spot, something such as a CNA, which is not really a livable wage in many communities, not being an end spot, but a stackable, a starting block that you can build on and put more trainings onto. So yes, there's been a great deal of work and effort put into making sure that NOFOs and the guidance and the technical assistance surrounds making sure that providers and industries know what credentials really will lead to a livable career path. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. But just to follow up on that, are there any pathways that have, again, I understand the state's different, I know the state's very different, but anything that have ones that sort of have risen to the top? I'm just curious, if we're going to set priorities of where we look, we should be looking at the things that seem most promising. And I just wondered if there was any, if you could just, like, these three, logistics, I don't know, whatever it is, like, that look interesting.
David,
Amy's going to jump in. Oh, go.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think in the last state plan, it was healthcare, manufacturing, and IT. Is that correct, Kenneth?
Yes,
So those would be the ones, if you're going to look at places to start, I would start at healthcare, manufacturing, and IT.
yep.
Agriculture in Illinois is always a big one. So that would be a nice fourth, because there's agribusiness and we do have that as one of our pillars. But I believe the Unified State Plan that we are in the process of reviewing and updating, but I believe those were the three. Is that, anybody else wants to jump in? Let me know if I'm wrong, Sarah or Molly.
I was just going to say those were the identified sectors with the youth, at least the youth career pathways from the Unified State Plan.
Did that answer your question then, David, if you want a
Yep.
starting point?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
So what I'm wondering right now is that we have about 2 minutes left on the Zoom link. So instead of like being scurried and getting kicked out, I'm thinking right now might be a nice smooth transition to hop onto the other link. It's in the chat. I emailed it to all of you. Lori and Maddie, I did not have your email, so I private messaged it to you. So it's in the chat. So I think this might be a good time to get out of this meeting and go on to the new link that I just sent everyone. Does anyone have any questions before we do that? Okay, great. See
Sounds
you all
good.
in a minute.